If you're a business owner or a business leader and you're managing all the functions of your C-suite, subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and let's start talking about how you can make the most use of your time so that you can enjoy life and keep the dream alive. Starting off here, we were just talking about the production and how to start a podcast, and we're just rolling it. Yeah. We're just rolling it straight up. So, Dallas, glad you're here, man.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here too.
We've been working to try to get this together for a little while.
Yeah, we finally made it happen. And I do have to tell a funny story to start this off.
Perfect.
We were talking about things you might hear in the background when you're trying to do a production like this. Yeah. So in my entrepreneurial journey, I've tried many things. I've been successful at some. I've failed at others. This one thing I tried, this was probably going back 10 years ago, is we had a connection in the Philippines of doing basically virtual assistants. Mm-hmm. Okay. And, you could hire them, and I think our cost rate was like maybe $2 an hour. Yeah. And it helped one of our clients' companies. And we started thinking like, hey, let's create a company. And so we created a company called Virtual eStaff.
Okay.
And Virtual eStaff, we started placing these Filipinos to work for companies, just doing administrative type work and all that stuff. And I had a big opportunity with this franchise called the Alternative Board, which I had been a member of. And I said, hey, look, we want to provide an administrative staff to the franchisor. Right. And so I got the CEO. He was like, yeah, I want to really try this. I want to be innovative and type stuff. So we set up the whole web call and all that type of stuff. And the lady was working from their houses, which they typically do, and they put just white sheets around them. And mm-hmm. we're trying to make it look as professional as we can. And so she gets on, and it's like 6 a.m. her time, whatever the time it was. And we started on this was going to be a big deal for us to sell to this company. And she's talking about it, and I was like, yeah, it's very professional. We do these things. And then all of a sudden, the roosters started crowing right outside of the background. And then someone's hair dryer goes on because they're all trying to get ready for school. We're like, oh, this is probably we're not going to win this opportunity.
Yeah, this is going to be tough.
So, yeah.
What ended up happening with that?
That was it.
That was it.
Yeah, and it ran its course, and we had 3 different partners, and that's actually a good thing to talk about. Is when you have 3 different equity partners, either you're all in or you're not, and then if one equity partner tends to be doing all the work but not really making any money, that was me, and I was like, I need to go spend my time somewhere else. Yeah. I'm not gonna do that without their being as involved as I am. So let it go.
That's a good way to kick it off.
Yeah.
So what is kind of like your story on how you've gotten to where you are now? Kind of like a little, kind of like at a high level, and then we could dig in. But just to kind of start off, how'd you get to where you are now?
Yeah. Well, I think it starts with I started my career off with the Army. Went to Accenture, which back then was Anderson Consulting. Yep. Did the top 20 MBA thing, and then I worked for IBM and had a good corporate time there for about 7 years. And on one of those flights, I used to fly out every week. I read this book called Wild at Heart. Yeah.
And I've read that since you told me about that.
It's I don't know what your religious viewpoints are or anything, but the essence of it is you got one shot at life.
That's right.
You don't get any do-overs. And at that point in time, I've been working hard, always one of the hardest working people on the team, and doing well. I was going to have enough money for retirement, but I was like, I might not even make it to retirement. I might die before that. So am I really doing what I want to do? And I thought through that, and ever since I was probably in 6th grade is when I had my first entrepreneurial venture. I figured out, I could make cinnamon toothpicks for a fraction of the cost that I could sell them for at school. I'd buy big bulks of gum. I actually figured out my margins and all that stuff, and I'd go sell all this at school. And so I knew I wanted to do something, and I didn't know what business to start, so I started buying businesses, and just was going to leave IBM. And at that point in time, I did not work with business brokers that really knew what they were doing, and that's what we do now.
Exactly.
So it's come full circle, and the businesses they were repping were either overpriced, didn't make any sense, and so I decided to start one, and I bought a franchise, or started a new franchise, called the Alternative Board. And I made that leap. But I do remember coming home after that flight, telling my now ex-wife that, hey, look, I'm going to leave IBM and start a company. And she's just like pregnant with our second child, looking at me like, what are you going to do? And then I think what scared her even more is like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do something. And so once you become an entrepreneur, and I think you're figuring this out too, is like, okay, I've got this initial business plan, but then all of a sudden all these different opportunities start appearing that you never thought about before because you're sort of in this corporate mindset. Yep. And so I've been involved in a lot of different ventures, still am today. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of how I got here. But there's a lot more in the middle of that story.
Absolutely. And I want to dig into that. But like before we do that, we were talking about this is, because I have a very, very similar background to you. I started in corporate, Deloitte and ABB in corporate jobs and was very structured. And then I started working for small business and got some entrepreneurial like taste because it's like you don't have this huge corporate structure behind you. It's like you've got to figure out how to get things done. Yeah. And then I had a similar conversation with my wife. And I think she was kind of like tired of hearing me bitch about it. And she was like, just shut up or like go do it, Yeah. And so that was part of it. But yeah, once you get into that, once you get a little taste of it, it's like, things just start to open up. And there's like just opportunities everywhere you look.
It's like the Matrix. When you take the pill, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I didn't realize there's all this stuff out here.
And part of that is like all the people that I've met, like yourself, it's like you go, we meet, we have a beer and we start talking. And then all of a sudden it's like, that there's an idea like,
that might work.
Yeah, let's give that a shot.
But and that's the other thing is in all my entrepreneur ventures, I did do a lot of business coaching. Don't do as much of that anymore now. Mm-hmm. I'm more of a mentor investor in some of the companies I'm involved with. And one of the things that's really tough, and I'm involved with an entrepreneur now too, is when you see all these things, it's like you still have to get focused. Yeah. Right. And you can't chase every opportunity. And I love my partner that I have, and one of his skill sets is being creative, a lot of energy, but I have to sometimes like bring him back down. Okay, that's great, but what are we going to do this week? What do we want to tell our team? Yeah, exactly. Do we want to tell them that we want to pivot on our model? No, not yet.
Let's not freak everybody out.
So you gotta, that's a little bit of the entrepreneurial curse is like everything looks shiny now,
Yeah, yeah. So from IBM, at what age were you? You had like a good solid career, like solid trajectory. You could have just stayed the course and been super well off, I'm sure. So at what age was it where you were like, I'm making the switch?
That's good. I think I'm 52 now. That was in 2000. It started January 2008, so that's going to be 12. It was 15 years ago, so I was mid-30s.
Cool.
And I had a great boss at the time. I was on the IBM has this thing with leadership succession. They will identify certain people, and if you get identified early on, it's like really cool. I was identified for that executive track. It was I had a lot of good things going for me, but it was not as fulfilling. You go travel someplace, different city, almost every week, working with people you really don't know that well, and you're just So that was one of the things I learned was after I started the business. The first part of my business was really focused on the business coaching and putting 6 to 8 non-competing business owners together at a peer advisory board meeting once a month. Yep. I learned a ton from those, but for me personally, what I learned is that it's this relationship. Mm-hmm. That is so important. It's not about just a job, getting in, making some money, and going back. It's like really enjoying the people that you work with, making a difference in their lives, them making a difference in your lives, and that was a reward I wasn't necessarily seeking or knew that was so important to me until I did it.
It's so funny you say that because it's so cool working with small businesses because the impact that you have is totally tangible, and you can help. So it affects people directly. Yeah. You could see how they could support their family, how they're achieving their goals, and it's just such a level of that level of fulfillment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would have to agree. It's a very similar feeling.
And
So,
when did we meet? Was it about a year and a half, 2 years ago?
I think it was like a year and a half ago because Rob Kaiser connected.
Yeah.
And it was, I think it wasn't more than a year and a half ago.
Yeah. So you've done a lot in a year and a half. And I remember sitting down and talking with you and all that coaching and all the different things I did work with entrepreneurs. Accounting is like right now, finding a good CPA that is going to be with you is so difficult right now.
Yeah.
And one of the major challenges, the biggest challenge I've seen with small business owners by far is HR.
Yeah.
From recruiting an employee to firing an employee and everything that happens in between. The second one is their books get screwed up. Mm-hmm. A lot of entrepreneurs do not have an accounting background. And, they go in there, they don't know the difference between a balance sheet or income statement, where should go what, and all that stuff. And, when you're ready to sell your business, you go in there like, man, your book's are really screwed up, And a lot of CPAs, they don't necessarily go in and make sure that stuff's all clean. They're like, look, I got to get what I need to get to report your revenue and your expenses, all that stuff in the middle, And so when you're talking about what you're doing, I was like, man, that is something that if I was to start my coaching business over in 2008, January, I'm like, okay, that would have been, because I didn't know how much of a need that was. And we've moved on and done other things now. So I knew you'd do well with it, but I didn't expect in a year and a half, you've got this awesome, amazing office. You've got some great team members. People that talk about you, that have worked with you, say how well
Thanks, man.
You've helped them. So congrats.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I didn't pay Dallas to say that.
No.
But the first thing you said was HR, and the reason I've been successful is 100% because I knew the importance of having a good team.
Yeah.
And the importance of investing in good people. And I took you around to meet everybody when you came in, and Elise was the first hire. And then she's been just incredible. That that was hiring that first employee is scary, man. It's like that's a tough one to overcome. And the second one's scary, but it starts to get a little bit less. And now you have like an infrastructure and like a team, and wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without it by no means.
It is so interesting, and that's so many entrepreneurs. They want to make money, obviously, and the driving cause is not money. What I found, it's being in control of your own destiny. Mm-hmm. That is not universal, but I would say if you did a poll, and based on my experience, if you ask people, why did you start your business? It's like, I want to do my own thing. I want to be in charge of my destiny. And as entrepreneurs start to build up and grow their business, especially professional services like yourself, it's like, okay, now I've gotten so many clients, I need to bring on another employee. Where I think some entrepreneurs get stuck is they're like, oh, but I want to spend that money. And they're like, oh, if I hire this employee, that's coming out of my paycheck. Yep. And that's the difference between working for the corporate world and being an entrepreneur is you really, when you got to make payroll, it's out of your wallet.
Exactly.
And so the fact that you've gone ahead and said, hey, look, you know what, I've got the growth, I'm going to go ahead and hire employees, and those are investments that you're making in your company that frankly could have been money going into your bank. Yep. But now that you're doing that, it's starting to have more of a cascading effect. So while you might not have made as much money in the short term, in the long term, you're probably going to be a lot better off.
I hope so. No,
I know you will.
I know so. Because I've been lucky enough to talk with enough smart people like yourself and work in businesses, and it's one of those like financial decisions that doesn't have a financial metric. It's like one of those like qualitative decisions where it's like you just have to know. Like it's like you can't measure the ROI of hiring a person. I mean, maybe you can, but I wouldn't even. That's kind of like. But
there's definitely metrics you could put to it, but it's like you're saying. You're not saying, hey, look, I'm going to buy a new machine to double my output.
Right. Exactly.
You're not getting that when you're an employee. In fact, hiring employees, one of the hardest positions to hire is a salesperson, and and really. Some of the best interviews you'll have interviewing sales candidates, they do really good. Salespeople should do good.
They should do good.
But then you get them, and then you end up paying a ton of money, and they don't work out. That has been one of the hardest positions is sales and professional services to hire. But other than that, operationally, when you're hiring them, you're going to get a certain amount of productivity with them.
Yeah, no, that's right. And with like the professional services firm, like there is, it's a little bit easier to put a metric and say, this person should be able to support this amount of revenue.
Right. That's right. That's right.
But
so I want to ask you this. So one of the challenges I had early on was that, first of all, my very first coaching client, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're paying XYZ per month, and I'm coming in here to sit for an hour, and they paid a lot of money for this. What am I going to do? Like, it sort of freaked me out, But I finally got into a groove of like a pattern of the things to probe on.
Yep.
With experience. But as I really tried to grow that business, I found it really difficult to scale. I had brought on team members, Rich Novak, Brian Smith, Randy Schwartz was with us for a while, where these are very successful leaders that have had their own company or corporate world that wanted to do the same coaching. They didn't know how to get coaching clients. I did.
Right, exactly.
And so I was feeding out the work to them. But what I did find is because so much of the firm was me, and it definitely is that case now that we've sort of scaled down and just focused on business brokerage with some coaching, is when you're out there selling, it's like, oh yeah, definitely want to go with Chris Capone. He's going to be, but now like you're so limited. Yeah. Like then they realize, oh, you're not the ones doing all my work. I've got to work with someone else. Yeah. So how have you tried to like sort of pivot from you doing all that to like now actually it's you telling a client it's not me, but I got a team and it's actually better off for you now.
Yeah.
So how have you tell me that journey?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult, and I'll tell you, like the first clients that I brought on, I'm still working with them very very directly. Like I haven't passed off the responsibilities much. I mean a little bit, like kind of some of the behind the scenes work. Yeah. But, whether it's right or wrong, and, you as a experienced, and business coach, tell me. But to me, it's like, those first clients believed in me, right? Yeah. And they helped me. I wouldn't have been able to kind of get to, where we've been without those first clients. Yeah. Because it's kind of like you said, like, with or I forget who I was talking about with the software. It's like, how do you sell software if no one's using it yet, right? You've got to have that first client, right? But so I would say that it's definitely something that I'm struggling with for sure. I think that's probably one of my biggest constraints to continued growth. But those early clients, I'm still working with them, and I want to. I truly do. But what I've started to do is Elise is part of a BNI group. Yeah. So she's the one that's actually going out and meeting meeting people and starting to network, so that it's more of an organic thing where it's like, hey, and Elise is doing a lot of the intake calls and a lot of the onboarding. And, her and I were sitting in here this morning and we were going through the client list, and there were 3 or 4 clients on there that I haven't even talked to yet, which is kind of weird.
That's awesome.
But I was just like, I was like looking at it, and it just made me so happy. I was like,
isn't that like a breakthrough moment?
That is a breakthrough
moment.
I
remember oh my gosh, we're sending out an invoice to a client I don't know about, and I didn't know we're invoicing.
Exactly.
Yes.
I know. It was the coolest thing. But I guess there's certain different businesses have different levels of complexity, right? Yeah. And so, and the way I've tried to approach it is, you get a team, right? And we've built the way we operate is based on the system that I've built. And, we've got a team of people that can support you, and that's kind of how it is, Yeah. So
that's good.
It's a little difficult, but.
So, I know that a big part of this podcast is you're interviewing other folks too.
Yeah, I know.
You know what? I'm going to turn this on you a little bit.
I like it.
So, one is, professional services industry. I think what you're in right now, it's and I'm dealing with this with another client I'm selling, and she's worried about a key employee leaving and starting another competing business. So you do this, and now you're sending out your team members to help develop sales, and they're doing the bookkeeping. And turnover is a real risk, and not only turnover, it's like, are you training your next best competitor, right? Exactly. And so, I've always said, okay, well, you got to build organization and culture where people don't want to leave, which means, there's you sort of end up taking the work that's all associated with the client and breaking it out to different team members so that, if they have to go start it, well, now you got to do everything.
Yep.
So how have you approached that as you're bringing these people on to keep them, the good ones, the ones that aren't, you obviously want to turn over.
Yep.
But those that want to stay, how do you what's the motivation that you give them to want to stay and not go start out their own bookkeeping and fractional CFO service?
Yeah, no, that's something that I think about a lot, and I'm still like early on where it hasn't necessarily gotten to that point, because Elise has been with me for 8 months now, and then Dan has been, 5 or 6 months, Catherine 3 or 4 months, and then Eric 2 months. So we're still but what I've tried to do is just start with hiring the right people that want the job for the right reason. And, so like, and it's hard to do, but ultimately, if you can, like, that's the gatekeeper, like that's the gatekeeper moment is hiring the right people.
Yeah.
And so like the interview process is like, is long. We meet, we talk. I take my wife with the interviewee and their spouse, and we go out to dinner and we talk, and like, we talk about life, and like, and Natalie had just as much of a, part on like, hiring some of these folks as I did. Cause it's more like when you see that you're working with real people and like you see the impact of the people, I think it helps you like understand like that we're all here for the same reason, and it's to make a living so that we can enjoy life. Right. And that's what I've always hired people on is like, we work to live, not the other way around. Yeah. So, I mean, there's only so much you can do with that. And I've tried to do that, but also I'm not, and I was talking with you about this, like I'm not a greedy person, and I know that there's going to become a point where, there's an opportunity for someone to make more money, or so the compensation factor is, I think I do pretty good from a compensation perspective. And as the business grows, there's going to be plenty of opportunity to share that growth with the people that, stick with and help us. And then finally, like, we're out of here at noon on Fridays. Yeah, it's like that type. Like you come into the office, like it's a fun place to be. We wear jeans, and like it's a totally non-corporate. Like my whole philosophy is like, if our clients are happy and the work's getting done and we're meeting our like metrics that you need, like, I mean, I don't necessarily care how and where and when you do the work. I mean, that's a big part of retaining employees right now, because it's, with all the remote work and all these changes, it's kind of just like, it's just making that flexible environment where, hey, you got to take your kids to doctor's appointments at 10 a.m. We'll just, come in after lunch, do what you got to do. I think there's a big part of that.
So it's culture.
Yeah.
Doing this and worked with well over 100 business owners, and as their advisory coach. And one of the things that I did that I always started with, I said, and we did this actually a little bit at when we had a beer at Waterman's the other day. It's like, but we can talk about business, we can talk about all this other stuff, but what I want to start off with is, what is your personal vision?
Yep.
And this isn't, a lot of times entrepreneurs will just default back into part of the vision is, no, you personally.
I think I did that too. I started to talk about the business. You're like, no.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
No.
And they just do it.
And
I said, no, because at the end of the day, if you're an entrepreneur, the business should be about supporting you, not, you just living to go to work type thing. And you've got all your personal guarantees out there. You've got the risk. You make payroll before you pay yourself. So ideally, where do you get the business to achieve your personal vision? Mm-hmm. And we had that conversation, and we went through it. It's how much do you want to work? How much do you want to make? Where do you want to travel? What activities do you want to be involved in? What brings you the most joy? Yeah. And how can you leverage that and do that? One of the things I found is once we started doing more of the performance culture stuff, working with not necessarily the owners, but then the managers and stuff, I'd ask the manager, I'd say, okay, you manage Jane over here. What's her personal vision? Mm-hmm. And they're like, blank stare. No, what's really important? Where does she want to be in life in 5 years? Mm-hmm. And that is one of the biggest mistakes managers don't, or that's one of the biggest mistakes they make, is not really trying to understand. Now, I'm not talking about, there's a balance between, what you do in the workplace and what you do outside of the workplace, but being able to understand each person you manage, their personal vision, is huge. And I wasn't trying to set you up to see, okay, how do you keep your employees? But that is one of them. Like, if they feel like, Chris knows where I want to be in 5 years, and he is helping support me get there. And sometimes that personal vision means that they're going to leave you. And I've had plenty of team members. I'm like, okay, we can't achieve your personal vision inside the company, but we can help you do these things so that it will position you so that you can.
Right. And then it's like there's a natural progression there.
And then like, I don't want to leave now.
That either. But, the first question that I ask everybody in an interview, and I got this in the book, Who? And it says, where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years? It's the first question I ask every single person. And it's so funny. Every single person that has worked here that we've hired have all said the same thing. And their answer, generally speaking, was, I want to work in a place where I have fulfillment in the work I do, where I can enjoy life and work with a team of people. Yeah. And so, it is crazy when you have the impact of getting a group of people that have a similar vision on what they want to achieve in their personal life, and then you put it together, and it's cool.
So have you had much conflict yet as you've been building the team?
No, and I'm like, honestly, I'm looking over my shoulder, like, when's it gonna happen?
But you gotta embrace it when it happens.
Yeah.
And this is not that, heck, no one likes conflict, right? You want to come up every morning and have no problems, right. but when the software company that we started, sort of a byproduct of the coaching service performance culture, which, I had a really nice exit a few years ago. I just lost my track because I was thinking about the exit we had. It was pretty nice. Where were we going on this?
We were talking about conflict with conflict.
That's right. Yeah. And so with that company, trying to accomplish something amazing, trying to create a software company, so we would have come in and we'd have different opinions.
Heck yeah.
Or you'd have a conflict with a customer, and I've said, you know what, we're not going to achieve something amazing without conflict. Mm-hmm. It's just going to naturally happen, and you're going to have friction. If you don't have friction, you're going to get to a certain point and plateau. So I've always said you got to embrace it. When it happens, it's like it's happening because we're on the course of doing something amazing. And to think that we could get there with everybody always agreeing, and not getting a little ticked off with each other,
right?
So
let's talk. So we talked about you started after IBM. You started the peer group, and that was also part of the coaching. Was that kind of the same?
Yeah, they at the Alternative Board they have a program called the Strategic Business Leadership Program, and it's a coaching model. Okay. And I studied it, got certified in it, and over a period of time, I've read so many books about different things. I've sort of blended it into my own system, and I called it performance culture. Yep. The entrepreneurial operating system. Gino Wickman, who wrote that. He was there was a lot of good stuff that I saw in his, but it didn't address some of the things that I wanted to do on the people side. So of course, like any entrepreneur, I'm like, okay, I'm going to create my own. Yeah. And a lot of it was around this what's called the performance values matrix. Okay. And we would, when I was coaching owners, I'd say, okay, let's take a look at your team, right? Okay, on one axis you have really, their skill sets, their acumen, their execution of their job. Salesperson is a good person. Is the salesperson crushing their goals? Yeah, that's the performance side. The other side are behaviors, right? And if you have an awesome salesperson, but every time that salesperson comes in office, everybody's like, oh God. We hate working with this guy, then you'd say behaviorally they're not aligned with what you'd want as a culture. And those are some of your most dangerous employees, these high performers that have behaviors that are hurting that are really causing everybody else to be a lower performer.
Yeah.
So we would look at this matrix, and in the 4 categories, if you have someone that's just awesome at their job, acumen's good, and then they're a great team player, they're a star employee.
Yep.
And I'd say, okay, so how do you coach? Do I need to coach someone on the acumen side, which is more about training and stuff, or do I need to coach someone on the behavior side? Hey, look, you might not realize this, but you're pissing people off in the office with what you're doing, or your attitude is not good. And so those attitudes and behaviors are a bigger factor than anything else. So we started coaching people with that, and had a spreadsheet. We'd plot everybody on the spreadsheet, and we go quarter by quarter, where are we moving? We want everybody to be up in the star category.
Yeah. So that would be the top right of the matrix?
Yeah, top right.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'd use the analogy, well, some people would say, well, not everybody should be in the top. And I said, well, who won the last Super Bowl? I think everybody at their position was probably pretty good, and they had great team chemistry.
Yep.
So as a manager, if you're like getting everybody in that top, that's how you win championships.
Yeah.
That's how you achieve amazing things. So we developed a whole process around the coaching, the check-ins, and all that stuff. And in fact, I'm helping another company look at how they implement something like that with their what they're doing today. So the spreadsheets were good, and then I was like, I'm coaching all these business owners, and again, I've learned just as much as hopefully I've helped them, is that part of what they're coaching is like work yourself out of a job so that you could take off for a month and have this great product and team that's scalable, have a niche focus, and it's going to be better for you now, and then when you eventually exit your company, which everybody will, either
in
through
one way
death
or another,
or something, you're going to exit.
Yeah.
You want to have a company that is sellable,
Yep.
or that even if it's going to be inherited by your children or whatever, you want to have it where it's not really relying on you.
Yep.
And when I was thinking through coaching all those owners, I was like, you know what? I looked myself in the mirror and I'm like, I'm not doing that with my own business.
So
coaching is not scalable. And I go sell a new client, they want to work with me, and and we had other good coaches, but you just sort of develop a relationship, and that's who I want to work with.
Yeah.
And I was like, that I'm not going to achieve my own personal goals. As much as I love this coaching work, I want to build something that somebody would want to buy my company. Do what I'm helping other entrepreneurs do. So when the performance culture method and the folks with the spreadsheets and all that stuff started working, I was like, I started working nights and weekends developing it as a software. And I'm not a software developer. I do have really good logic skills, and I understood database structure to an extent. And but I just kept banging at it, looking at YouTube video, whatever it was, to figure out. Because I've seen so many people have a software idea, and they go out and hire a developer to go build it, and it fails.
Right.
The developer's not inside the person's head,
Exactly.
and they don't know everything. And then once that developer leaves, goes on the next thing, who's going to maintain your software? So I knew, I was like, I'm going to do this. I really want to know. And so I built it with that, which was really good. The initial product that I came out with, I was like, oh, I want it to do this now. So whatever I had told the developer with my initial design anyway wouldn't have been right.
Right, exactly.
I sort of learned it's an iterative process. And one of our clients, James E. Moore, was, I think, the first client to adopt this. And so we implemented it with our company. We had someone on our team that was working with them, and they really liked it. Jim is a mentor to me, I believe, and I know. And so we got there and I'm like, okay, well, let's try it with another client. We tried it with another client. So we had about 4 or 5 of our clients that were paying us a monthly retainer for services, just sort of like they would pay for you.
Yep.
And they were getting the software for free.
Nice.
And that was just because I wanted to see if it would work. And once we had enough traction with that, I was like, you know what, this could be the company. And, Rich, Brian, and myself put in the initial investment, and I was very fortunate, like you. I had a different company that was actually making money that was paying my bills at that point, and so I could use the extra cash flow to invest in it. And I won't say it took off.
Yeah.
First year was like, okay, we're going to do this. Let's get we had no paying clients the very first year. I was like, by the end of the year, let's be at $10,000 of monthly recurring revenue with software. certainly knowing that our cost per month was a lot more than that, but like,
Right.
let's try to get to.
Hey, yes.
We ended that first year. I think we're about $2,500 monthly recurring revenue,
Yep.
and and you make money on one side, and then you put it in the other side, and you're like, man, this better go. And then the next year, like, all right, well, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? Rich and Brian were invaluable. And then we got it to the next year. I think we ended the second year at that $10,000 monthly recurring revenue. All right, we're getting there, still losing money. Third year, we started like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. And I'll never forget, we started like, got Quinnipiac University. We started getting some actually bigger brands. Like, we were like, holy shit, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And then we got some other really good brands, and that's when we knew, like, okay, we had something.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So did you guys have to raise any money for that venture, or?
Well, we're very fortunate that Rich and Brian were angel investors, and we're very fortunate at that point in time. I got into business brokerage. I guess my first deal was about 10 years ago, and I just took those commissions and invested.
Yeah.
Brian invested in Rich, Brian. But one of the things I liked about, Rich, I have so much to thank for both of them. One of the things that as I was growing, and I was fortunate with making the money that we were making, is that I'd say, all right, Brian, we're going to run out. I did cash flow budgeting. You would be so proud with your financial background. Like, damn, that was good. I knew which month we were running out of money.
Exactly.
And so I go, Brian, I'm like, Brian, we're going to need another 50. I'll put in 25. We put in 25, and we issued ourselves more stock.
Got it.
Every time we did that.
Yep.
And so thank God we had Brian in there to just be able to match it, and it sort of mitigated some of my personal risk with that too.
Right. Yeah. And then so from like, year one, ground zero, 4 clients, no paying clients, to like getting it to a point of like, hey, like, we're making money. How long did that take? What was that timeline like?
5th year.
Okay.
4th and 5th year. 4th year was, I think, just about breaking even.
Okay.
And well, with the exception, so the 5th year, we had I had made friends with Jurassic Capital, Kevin Mosley over there, Jim Roberts, who in our area is always hooking up entrepreneurs, and he just made an introduction on that, and that was early on with Kevin Mosley, and we stayed in touch, and in the 5th year was when, like, holy cow, we ran the whole numbers. I think we were making about $50,000 of EBITDA, which but we hit the big number we hit was that we were now over $1 million of annual recurring revenue.
Yeah.
And that's when, like, people try to raise money all the time. It's like, well, you gotta show me. Well, I can't show you until I have the money. Like, so it's chicken and the egg.
Exactly.
So, but so we self-funded, we scrapped, we did everything we could, and we got it to that secret number, and not secret number, that one number where if you're going to really attract investors. Yeah. And I love their thesis. Jurassic Capital was founded by a couple of folks that started Bronto Software. They built that. They had a $200 million exit of themselves. It was a software as a service. They deployed some of their own capital in there. And, if I was going to sell the company, I knew I didn't want to be involved with it anymore. It's like, it's a whole different game once you get investors in there.
Sure.
But knowing that, hey, look, these are operators. These are not your, I did the MBA thing, so, but, a lot of MBA super smart financial people, they don't know how to run a company, right? Like, I can look at a spreadsheet all day long and tell you, like, what's wrong with it. But, I mean, to recruit the people you've recruited that go to make the sales, that's a whole different model. So these were operators, and that was running this fund, and I thought they would do a really good job with really just taking what was my initial vision and carrying that on with the team that was continuing with them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then at what point did you hire like a COO or like for that business, or was that for a different business?
Um,
Or you hired like a key employee?
yeah. Well, Melissa Philippi was someone that was on our team at that point in time. She was actually doing a lot of sales coaching for James E. Moore and helped implement that. So,
Got it.
you know, while I had developed the initial framework and stuff like that, she was out in the field implementing it. And so, one of the beauties of the design of creating performance culture is like I could not work in it full time. Like I still had to do my coaching business.
Right,
I still had to do my business brokerage business. I still had to run the IMAF Cape Fear Angel Fund, and I didn't have hardly any money, you know, to go, you know, outside of start. I had money to help get it started, but not much. So we worked out a deal where she came in and said, "Look, you know, should be a part of the company. Very modest salary, but huge upside if you hit certain sales targets." You know, that's how you get more equity.
Yep.
And it was brilliant the way it worked out. Worked out well for her, worked out well for the company, and she built it up, and she did a really good job while I was still involved in other things.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about working yourself out of the job, that company was started already without me being there 100%. I was involved in a lot of other things.
Yeah. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably deal with this issue. It's like, you know, I want to get this good person, but I can't necessarily afford them. And so the only other way to compensate them is with equity, but I don't want to give away any of the equity. It's my business, you know? But it's kind of like, I mean, it sounds like you had a really amazing experience with, you know, offering a good person some equity because they were able to, you know, they were motivated to.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to say about that. One is I think it's a mistake on day one to say, hey, look, here's your equity.
Right.
You know, that's to help recruit someone, but they haven't done anything yet.
Right.
And that person doesn't work out. Guess what?
Yeah.
You're stuck with an equity partner.
Yep.
If you say, hey, look, you know, if you drive X amount of value in my business, you've increased my company, let's just say tenfold. For that, absolutely you should get equity. And then equity is awarded based on performance.
Based on performance.
Versus, and so that was one of the better decisions I made in terms of how you incent someone with that. And I would say it worked out for that person, but for a lot of people, they don't have that entrepreneurial mindset. And I have seen like, hey, look, we're going to do stock options. And there's some people like, great, thanks. What can I do with it?
Yeah.
You know, we'll wait until we have an exit one day. When's that going to be?
Yeah.
What if I leave? You know, some people just don't get it.
Right.
Other people are like, yes, I've got a stakeholder in this company. I've got options. And so when I've talked with entrepreneurs about how you compensate and motivate employees with compensation, like I got one guy that I work with right now. It's like he just was like, I don't understand. If I had a bonus, if I had this or that, I'm giving her these things. I'm like, some people it just doesn't motivate them. Some people aren't motivated by the equity. Other people will be, you know.
Yeah, and that goes back to like one of the initial points we talked about was like knowing your people and knowing what their personal vision is, right? I mean, it's, you know, like there's not one compensation metric that, you know, is the right fit. Like it depends on who the individual is, what motivates that person. And yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's a story about that where there's this sales guy that was for a company I've worked with over the years, and he started crushing it, and he was already making close to $200,000. You know, he's that good, brought a lot of value, and then it was the end of year bonuses, and the owner was thinking about what to do. And I was like, you know, you've already paid him, like, you know, you reward him as sales come in. So what does he really like to do? He's like, man, this guy loves to fish. It's like, man, go out and get him a gift card to Texas Tackle, you know, because whatever monetary bonus you throw him is going to probably be insignificant to the $200,000 he's made in commissions, you know. So he went out there and did that, and you know they did their Christmas things, and he gave them to him, and he said that had the biggest impact on that employee. It's like, you know, it was only a couple $100, but for this guy, like, you know, the manager knew what he loved. And it's like, man, you really took this in. That was huge. That's a big thing I think managers can do is like, you know, do something that is personally meaning to that employee.
Yeah.
Personally meaningful.
Awesome. Man, somehow we're already at
That went by quick.
At the end of our time, and we barely even scratched the surface, but we'll have to do a part 2 and maybe a part 3 sometime. But I guess kind of like in closing, what would you say your greatest success has been over the period of your career?
Yeah. Well, I think one, just put everything in perspective. There's nothing more important to me in this world than my kids.
Yeah.
So, and there's been a lot of good ups and downs with that, but that, by far is like, if I look back at my life, that's my biggest thing. But, not to get all crazy emotional or anything, but then if you get, if you look beyond that, you just say, okay, what have you done in the business world and those things? Golly, I don't know if I could pick to one thing. I mean, coming up with a software idea, launching it, selling it.
Yeah, that's
like that's pretty damn good.
That's
right?
Every entrepreneur's dream.
Yeah.
I mean,
so going that full cycle and now helping other entrepreneurs along that entrepreneurial journey, like, have you ever had professors or whatever where, they come in, they teach you the book stuff, but like they've never gone out there and made it themselves. Exactly. Versus a professor that comes in and says, look, I've been there, I've done that, I've crushed the world, I'm semi-retired now, but I'm going to do this because I love teaching you. Like, you have a lot more respect because that person has actually gone out there and done it. So I think having that frame of reference and now working with other owners, working with people like, I pay rent nowadays by selling businesses.
Yep.
And I can completely relate to the owner selling the business. It's like, I'm not just a broker. I've been in your shoes. And I know there's going to be an emotional charge, going through this whole process. I can completely relate to it. Now just getting involved. I got involved with a real estate company out west that made an investment. And, I'm not an employee or anything like that. But, as an investor, as an advisor with these younger people that one of them used to work on our team right out of college, he interned for us. Like, knowing what Rich and Brian did for me as investors and mentors, and now being able to invest in that company and mentor him, and his wife who is also in the business, and just see that, and hopefully I make a difference. Is huge.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would say that who better else to help sell your business than someone that's started, grown, and sold their own business, right?
Yeah.
And so if people want to get in touch with you, what's the website? What's the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
Yeah. Just go to our website's launchgrowexit.com.
Okay.
It's Cornerstone Business Advisors.
Okay.
And it's we have launch is because we've been very involved with helping companies start their business, raise money, and we don't do that as much anymore.
Right.
The growth was when we were really doing a lot of coaching on that. And now it's so funny, it's come full circle. Yeah. Now most of our work is really on the exit side. So launch, grow, exit.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Dallas, thanks a lot
enjoyed
for
it.
coming
This was
in, man.
fun.
I appreciate you interviewing me.
Next time, I'll get in your shorts a little bit more with your personal vision.
Cool. Awesome.
Enjoyed it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Mm.